Every professional has a unique magic waiting to be discovered. At Finding the Unicorn in You helps you unlock your hidden potential. Thank you for tuning in. Now switching it over to our host.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Finding the Unicorn in You. Today, I have a special guest who is a passionate leadership speaker and company culture consultant with over a decade of experience transforming teams and inspiring leaders. He holds an executive master's degree in leadership from the University of Southern California, blending academic knowledge with real world insights to empower leaders. In addition, his journey from overcoming asthma to becoming an ultra marathon runner exemplifies resilience, and determination. His passion for personal development and professional growth shines through in every talk. Without further ado, welcome Jesper McQuindang.
Dr. Jaime, thank you so much for bringing me on today. I'm super excited to join you.
So there's a lot of things I want to unpack from your bio. So before I even tell you any of my questions, why don't you tell me in your own words, tell me a little bit about yourself and what got you doing what you're doing?
Absolutely. I am in the world of company culture and leadership development. What I do, I really enjoy helping leaders and managers build stronger teams with team building activities, leadership development assessments, and coaching. And what brought me into this field is the impact that leadership brings. When I was growing up, I was essentially learning leadership lessons from different aspects. I would say from becoming involved in my community, I've learned the value of service. And when I started my career, I was promoted to a supervisory role. And I realized the impact that a leader has when you're bringing this vision, the mission, the purpose, and your employees, your staff, they see that really enlightens them and encourages them to really put their best effort. Leadership does make a difference. And when you're intentional about how you lead others, they can see that and they'll step into their best selves.
I agree. I agree 1,000% with that. And it really does go from the top bottom. You have to be able to fix the leadership in order for the staff to have a role model, because how are they supposed to be doing X, Y, and Z when they see that leadership is doing ABC?
That's right. We've seen throughout history, especially when you watch the news, leaders, they preach certain things publicly in documents, but when they do something else that is not coherent or aligns with the values that they speak for, you start to see employees just either they start to ignore what they stand for or they just do something that's completely off brand. And that really compromises the integrity of the organization. So it's very important for leaders to stay aligned and integrated with the values and the purpose and the principles that they preach to the people that follow them.
Yeah. And from your experience of when you worked with leaders, like what would you say is one of the main roadblocks that you encounter in an organization?
For many leaders, especially when we see the role of leader, a lot of people see leadership as a position or title. And it's more than that. I've seen people get promoted and suddenly, magically, they think they're all that in a bag of chips. Leadership is earned. They have to understand that now that you're in a role of leadership, you have this new weight of responsibility and accountability.
Hmm.
Being a leader does not necessarily give you permission to step over other people. As a leader, your new role is to lift and help grow and develop the people that you're surrounded with. And I've noticed that when it comes to leadership, there isn't enough of this formal education around. Many people who step into this role of leadership for the first time, they really don't have this clarity. And again, with this title, they think they have the magic wand to suddenly present this new sense of authority. But again, to be an effective leader, it's all about creating the space for other people to learn, grow, and develop. And you want to be there to listen and support their journey in that growth and development.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm just reminiscing to my first time I became a leader in an organization, and I was humbled very quick. I was hired. This was like in my past life. When I was very young, I was a lifeguard and I became a program supervisor for an aquatics program. And I was chosen just because I was a really hard worker at the time and I had the licensures that they needed to have me go into that position. And oh, did I let it get to my head? It was an insane. I was what, 22 years old, brand new, was in charge of at least 80 people. And I was like, wow, I need to act a certain way. I need to dress a certain way. And I was, in a sense, kissing ass to the boss because I wanted to look good. But in consequently, I was treating everybody else lesser than. And honestly, it was because of one person that came up to me and talked to me that it really changed my perspective. She was basically like, "We used to like you. I mean, we used to respect you when you were a lead and you were a lifeguard. But as soon as you got into leadership, you let it get to your head and you're being an asshole." She's like straight and blank. And she's like, "And I hope I don't get fired for this, but I think it's my duty as your friend and also as your colleague to let you know that if you continue this path, you're not going to be any different than any other asshole in management. And you're going to end up having a really horrible career and people are never going to like you." And it was just like, oh shoot. I had to really reevaluate all of my morals, my ethics, my strategies. And from that point on, I started doing research to be a more ethical and like more moral leader. And what you're saying is completely true. So I'm curious, is this a story that you've like heard time and time again?
Dr. Jaime, you brought up an excellent perspective. When it comes to leadership, I've noticed that many people assume leadership is having all the answers.
Hmm.
And when they step into that perspective of thinking they need to have all the answers, they get into this mode where suddenly they feel this pressure to be that person on top, the expert, the authority. And because of that role, now it presents this kind of person who's more, I'd say, not necessarily tougher, but just more formalized in how they need to present themselves in a certain way. But when people realize that for effective leaders, you don't need all the answers, you just need to be able to provide a healthy sense of direction to your team. But I've noticed that leaders think they need to have all the answers. And because of that, now they're treating other people a certain way. And many times that doesn't come off as well to the other people who are being affected by those leaders who feel they need to be in a position of that formal authority. But at the same time, when leaders realize that it's okay to be human and work with their staff members side by side, not necessarily being the one to give out demands, but to be the encouraging source of support, helping other people understand how they can succeed in their roles. That's where we see a more effective understanding of leadership. Yes, you brought up an excellent perspective because, again, leadership does not necessarily mean having all the answers. It just means that you're there to provide that sense of clarity for other people and help them grow where they need to be.
People sometimes get so much anxiety because they feel that they have to be the one-stop shop that everybody goes to and relies on. They stop asking for help. They stop leaning for in support with their peers. They feel that their peers, their feedback is insufficient or inadequate. So they don't listen. They stop listening. They just start putting themselves in their bubble and what I say goes. And it's coming from a good place. It's not like they're bad people, but they let that anxiety and that overwhelm take over and they shut down.
That's right, Dr. Jaime. You brought up an excellent perspective. It's this general understanding of leadership being that sense of, maybe that is command, maybe that is that strong sense of direction, maybe it is that super confident persona. And for many people, that can create a lot of pressure. And when they feel that pressure, it causes these people to lead a certain way that may turn off other people. But then again, when they realize leadership is not that traditional command and control, giving people that sense of fear or doubt. When you really open up that space, leaders can get a better level of comfort in understanding that effective leadership is not that old way of pushing people around. It's being that source of support that can help people understand how they can reach higher levels of their potential.
Yeah, I 1000% agree. And it's just being vulnerable, having open communication, inclusive, and allowing your staff to grow, giving them opportunities where they can be challenged, where they can continue to feel empowered and they feel included in the organization. I think a lot of the times we want to give them busy work, but it's not really challenging. It's not really like stimulating for them. So the staff, it's, oh, this is monotonous work. I don't want to do this because I'm wasting my time. They start going through unmotivated, like a phase of unmotivation, which can essentially lead to burnout, and then they end up leaving.
That's right. Especially in this situation, leaders have that great opportunity to instill that sense of purpose, mission, values, principles. Because when we look at the workplace on the day to day, many times we're doing some of the same project and task over time. But when you remind your staff members that what they're doing leads to something bigger, that's really going to empower them. For example, when I started my career, I was in the hospitality industry and I worked for a travel company. And my department was responsible for creating guidebooks that provided information for clients on what they can expect when they travel around the United States. Now, when you look at this from a day to day basis, you're printing pages, you're just providing text about the suggestions and ideas that they can do in the destinations that they've arrived at. Now, on a day to day, that just sounds like regular job. You're typing, you're printing, you're putting pages together. But from my perspective, when I was supervising that team, I reminded them that in this role, we're helping our clients achieve their dreams as they travel across the country. Keyword, the word dreams, that's really going to remind your people that what you're doing really means a lot to the people that you're serving. So when it came to my role in providing that sense of inspiration, that really motivated them to understand that what they're doing really does make a difference, especially in the lives of our clients.
Yeah, I like that. And what do you recommend if somebody is in a leadership position right now that's listening to this or is considering going into a leadership position and is aware that this is a potential like issue that can come in of them having what we just discussed? What do you recommend they do? What's the one baby step they can do to improve themselves and not fall into that negative leadership loop?
Absolutely. When it comes to leadership, especially when we're looking at a new generation of leaders, I've noticed that there is a hesitancy of people that want to step into a leadership role because when we look at leadership, we see it as this great sense of responsibility, and it scares people because leadership is a lot to consider and look forward to. But I would say for those who are stepping into a leadership role, consider it as an opportunity for growth. It's continuous learning, lifelong learning. It's this opportunity to experiment, innovate, create, see what works. As the metaphor goes, throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. View leadership as that opportunity to really see what works and what doesn't work. Again, leadership is not this old, archaic, outdated form where you need to push people around. No, that's not leadership at all. Leadership is this opportunity to really innovate and grow and see what works for you and your team.
Yeah, it's a lot of trial and error at the end of the day, and it's easier said than done. And people think that there's this magical pill you can take, and then the next day you're a wonderful leader. But you have to put in the time, you have to put in the effort, and you have to be okay with making mistakes. The mistakes are going to happen, but the key is learning from your mistakes and then persevering forward, not repeating the same mistake over and over again.
That's right. And there were some keywords that you brought up earlier that really brought up some great perspective. And you mentioned that leadership is empowering and inclusive. And that's exactly what leaders should promote in the environments that they create. You want to encourage your team members to really experiment as well and see what works, what can improve, and to be inclusive, being that supportive person
Mm-hmm.
in the group that you're working with and believing that they can achieve higher levels of success. Those are the types of environments that leaders should create. So great keywords that you brought up earlier.
Thank you. Now, I want to shift into your other accomplishment, which you've accomplished a lot. But I want to go over how you went from overcoming asthma and becoming an ultra marathon. So, full disclosure, I just finished my first marathon and I almost died doing it. So I could only imagine how much harder it is for you to do an ultra marathon because that's longer, it's more intense. So, how did you even start to say, you know what, I'm going to do an ultra marathon?
Absolutely. I'm curious about your marathon. Congratulations on your marathon.
Thank you.
What was that experience? Where did you run and what was that experience like?
I did the Long Beach Marathon in October of 2024, so last year. And last year was my year of running. I went from not being able to run a block to being able to do a 5K, 10K, all the way to a marathon. And I was the last one to finish, but I finished. And that was my goal, is just to finish the marathon.
Congratulations. You reached the finish line. That's what counts. That's how it was for me as well. My story, just growing up, there was something that just defined my lifestyle. And I would hold my inhaler around, realizing, is this my life? And then growing up with that, you have people suddenly defining your limits, holding you to lower standards, holding you to lower expectations. And over time, I realized this is not the kind of lifestyle that I wanted to go through. We see on TV, you see that kid stuck in the room looking out the window. They see other kids playing in the streets, having fun, soccer, kickball, you name it. That's the kind of mentality that I started to feel. I felt like I was that kid stuck in the room. But over time, I was inspired by just major goals of other people. And I saw marathon running and I realized there's just so much to gain if I decide to go from this experience. This is really going to be a massive goal that can potentially prove that I can really overcome the odds. And for some reason, I decided to put it as a bucket list item. And I took it step by step, of course. I didn't wake up one day and just decide to run 26.2 miles. That would have been a little bit crazy. I really took it step by step. As you mentioned, I would just walk outside the block, take a few steps, and then a couple weeks later, add more distance. And then I started signing up for a 5K. And then when I completed that, I signed up for a 10K and then a half. And of course, there were challenges along the way. It's not easy to train for these things. And then my first marathon, I was in San Diego. It was a nice and sunny day, but I remember reaching mile 23 and my legs just gave out.
Yeah.
I was just really exhausted, in pain, but I realized I'm at mile 23. Why stop now? Even if I know there's this quote, I'm paraphrasing, by Martin Luther King, if you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, crawl. I didn't necessarily crawl, but that quote just inspired me just to keep going. And then I didn't necessarily run the remainder, but I kept a steady pace, just reminding myself to keep going. But when I reached that finish line at 26.2 miles, that sense of accomplishment just really made me feel good. Just going from, again, childhood asthma and then taking it step by step, working my way to that marathon really made me feel good. And then a couple of years later, again, with that same inspiration, I added an ultramarathon to my bucket list. And the training, yes, it is a lot more. But through my experience going through my marathon, I brought that same mentality to really keep pushing myself. Again, like Martin Luther King Jr. says, if you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. I don't recommend crawling in a marathon, but it's just a reminder to just keep going.
Congrats. That is like an amazing feat. And it's not, I think the statistic is less than 10% of the population runs a marathon. So I can only imagine even like a quarter of that, not even like a quarter of that, probably 1% of that actually run an ultra marathon. So for our listeners, because I get asked this like all the time, just for the marathon, like they're like, what's the difference between a 5K and a marathon? But what's the difference for you? What is the difference between a marathon and an ultra marathon?
So for a marathon, it is that 26.2 mile mark. And then for an ultra marathon, it's anything above that. So my first ultra marathon was 50 kilometers, which translates to about 30 to 31, somewhere around there, 30 to 31 miles.
That wall that you said that you hit on 23, that's exactly what I felt. And it was like I was limping and I was like in this zombie like mode where I was like, I just need to finish. I have one goal and that's all I'm gonna do. And I was like limping and waddling and trying to like sprint and walk. And it was this whole thing. But you have to take it one step at a time. And if you keep thinking like of how much you have left, it can be daunting because you're like, I've done 23 miles, but I still have 3 more miles to go, or 2 more miles to go, or 1 more mile to go. And when I was in that perspective, I wanted to give up because I was just like, this is too much. I don't know if I can keep doing this. But when I was like, damn, I've already ran 23 miles. I need to keep going. I can't stop. I can't stop. And that's what like led me going. It's okay. I've done 24 miles. Good. Just keep going. Don't even think about what's left. Just keep going. Just keep going. And eventually you get there.
You brought up a very good perspective, the wall. And this applies to anything in life, marathon, outside a marathon. For many of us, we reach a point in the goals that we strive for. There's something that's difficult that gets in our way. And for many people, it can discourage us. And we feel this temptation to give up because to a point, it gets so hard. And to a specific example, marathon, especially physical activity, it can get hard. But outside the marathon world, with big goals that we strive for, there can get to this point where something gets very challenging and really gets us to consider, should we step back? Was this all worth it? Did this mean anything? This is difficult. I don't know how to move forward. But in these moments where we're challenged, that's where it will really test your character. And when you can get over the wall and really push yourself and keep going, that's when you realize once you accomplish that major goal, you can really accomplish anything that you set your mind to. If you keep going, push through that wall, get over it, get over that wall, and realize that, yes, big things can happen for you.
Yeah. And it's just learning that you're your own limit every single time. The people around you are not pushing you down. The people around you or things around you, maybe barriers, but you can overcome those. At the end of the day, it's your willpower and your determination of, am I going to get this done? Am I going to be that marathon runner? Am I going to be the leader that is going to inspire other people? Am I going to be the person that accomplishes their doctorate degree, their master's degree, the therapist, whatever you're going to do? You are the person that decides that. And you're the person that is going to determine if you're going to be successful or not.
That's right. And that reminds me of a quote. And I don't remember where I've heard it, but the quote is, if your goals don't scare you, they're not big enough.
Yeah.
And that really should inspire people to take it up a notch, because when you're playing small, the results you get are going to be small. But when you really raise the stakes for yourself and accomplish greater things, that's when you realize so much is possible for you.
I love that a lot. And it's comforting because my friends always says I have the most audacious goals. And they're like, you always accomplish them, but it's every time they're like, okay, here we go again. He's going to be stressed out as heck trying to get all this stuff done. But I always do it. And it's hard when you're in it, but it feels so good when you finish it. And what always keeps me going too is there's a stat that researchers have said that people feel the happiest during the process of accomplishing a goal and less happy when they finish the goal. So you have to enjoy the moment because it's the moment between point A and point B that you feel you're gonna be enjoying life the most, not at point A or point B. It's all in the middle. Embrace it, enjoy it, and take it one day at a time.
Absolutely. And that really ties in directly to the specific example of us running our marathons. It was the journey of that training, putting our running shoes on, really getting those steps in, really getting those miles in. That's when we feel like we've really grown. At the end of the day, when we got our medals, we were excited, absolutely. But when we reflect back on the overall journey, again, it's that training, having to get up day in, day out, long mornings, long nights, you name it, just to make sure our training was just up to speed. That's when we realized we were really learning, growing, and progressing throughout that journey.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we're at the end of the podcast, and I want to ask you the last question, which is the unicorn question. What has been the unicorn lesson that has impacted you the most and has made you the person that you are today?
Absolutely. So as I reflect back on my journey and especially this conversation, I would say it's that sense of resilience that really pushes you
Mm.
to realize that so much is possible when you put in the time and effort to reach high and accomplish those goals. So this sense of getting back up and reaching the next level. There's a proverb, fall 7 times, get back 8. And that really does make a difference in how much you can accomplish in our world.
Yeah, you just have to dust yourself off after every fall and keep going. I tell this to all my clients. You don't truly fail unless you give up.
That's right.
Yeah, I love that. That is a really good lesson. Thank you, Jesper, for everything. This has been a wonderful conversation. If somebody wants to hire you or if they want to follow your journey, how can they do so?
Yes. I encourage everyone to follow me on LinkedIn, Jesper McQuindang, and feel free to reach out. Love having conversations about workplace culture, leadership, team building, you name it. Feel free to reach out. Happy to have those conversations.
Perfect. Awesome. And for listeners, if you scroll down, you'll on the show notes, you'll be able to see all of the links and more information on Jesper. And if you go into my website at rainbowcareercoaching.com, hit the wall, click the wall, unicorn wall of fame, you'll see Jesper on there with his bio, all the links as well, and a summary of the podcast. Thank you, Jesper, for all of your time. And any last closing words before we close up today?
Yes, so there's a mathematical equation that I like to share with people. And I know our listeners were probably thinking, math? I don't want to do math. But this math is relevant to the work we do as leaders. And the equation is dreaming plus doing equals innovating. And when it comes to dreaming, as leaders, set high goals, experiment, create, have ideas that are unique and special. And when you add that to doing, take action. Daydreaming is one thing, but when you actually get up and make something happen, that leads to the final part of the equation. Dreaming plus doing equals innovating. When you dream big and take action on it, that's when you become innovative and start creating meaningful difference in the world. So dreaming plus doing equals innovating.
What a beautiful way to close. Thank you so much, Jesper. And until next time, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Jaime.